Captain Kale, Vance awakened to the bitter taste of copper in his mouth and the cold press of metal against his back. His eyelids felt heavy, weighted with exhaustion as consciousness slowly returned. The dimly lit enclosure surrounding him was alien in design. Curved walls of some dark material interspersed with pulsing veins of blue light. Not a UEDF vessel, certainly. Memory flooded back in painful fragments. The routine patrol mission along the frontier of mapped space. The sudden appearance of unknown vessels on his sensors. The desperate call for backup that went unanswered before his fighter was disabled by some kind of energy weapon he'd never encountered before. Kale tested his limbs, wincing at the sharp pain in his ribs. Probably cracked, but nothing felt broken. Military training kicking in, he began cataloging his surroundings. A cell, approximately 4 meters by 3, a single energy barrier instead of traditional bars serving as the fourth wall, casting an eerie greenish glow across the chamber. You're finally conscious. Good. The gravelly voice startled him. An elderly man sat hunched in the corner, his UEDF Science Division uniform tattered and stained but still recognizable. Dr. Eris Thorne. The man introduced himself, not offering a hand. Lead xenobiology researcher. I was aboard the escort vessel when they attacked. You're the fighter pilot they dragged in 6 hours ago. Captain Kalen Vance, 103rd Tactical Wing. Kale replied automatically, his voice rough from disuse. Where are we? They call it VH Lock Station, a detention and processing facility, from what I've gathered, run by the Cathar Empire. Dr. Thorne's voice lowered. Reptilian humanoids, highly aggressive, hierarchical society. They've built quite an interstellar empire through conquest. How many other survivors? Kale pushed himself into a sitting position, ignoring the protest from his battered body. 17 from the escort vessel, including myself. You're the only fighter pilot they captured alive. The others? Thorne's eyes darkened. They don't value prisoners who can't serve a purpose. Before Kale could respond, heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor outside their cell. A massive figure appeared, towering at least 7 feet tall. The creature's body was covered in scales of varying shades of green, with a powerful, muscular frame and a head reminiscent of Earth's ancient reptiles, though more angular and with far more intelligence burning in its yellow, slitted eyes. Awake, human slave? The Cathar guard sneered, revealing rows of sharp teeth. His voice translator made the words sound even more contemptuous. I am Gorik, your keeper. Soon you will learn your place in the universe. Kale kept his expression neutral, saying nothing, observing the guard's equipment, stance, and mannerisms. The reptilian wore some kind of armor over vital areas, carried an energy weapon on his hip, and moved with the confidence of a seasoned warrior. Nothing to say? Perhaps your species is finally learning wisdom. Gorik chuckled, a disturbing rumbling sound. Commander Forlag has decided your fate. You and the other primates will participate in the purification ritual. His eyes narrowed with malicious delight. You will face our warriors in the arena to prove your worth or die trying, most likely the latter. The energy barrier flickered and disappeared. Gorik entered with another guard, both looming over Kale. Stand, human. When Kale didn't immediately comply, Gorik struck him across the face with a scaled fist. I said stand. Kale absorbed the blow, cataloging the guard's striking pattern and force even as blood trickled from his split lip. He rose slowly, maintaining eye contact with his captor. The commander wishes to see what primitive meat was caught in our nets today. Gorik roughly shoved Kale forward. Move. As they marched through corridors of the station, Kale's tactical mind mapped their path, noting security measures, access points, and the general layout. The facility was massive, a sprawling complex that seemed to serve multiple purposes beyond just attainment. They passed other holding cells containing various species, some humanoid, others wildly different in form. Most looked malnourished, defeated, their spirits broken. Kale made mental notes of everything. The apparent hierarchy among guards, the technology used for restraints, the rotation of sentries. Finally, They reached a large central chamber where several other humans from the escort vessel were already gathered, guarded by more Kthar soldiers. Among them was Dr. Thorne, who had apparently been brought through a different route. A movement in the corner caught Kale's attention. A slender, avian-like being with iridescent feathers and piercing eyes that tracked every movement in the room. Unlike the others, this prisoner seemed alert, calculating, studying the guards just as Kale was. When their eyes met briefly, Kale detected no warmth, only cold assessment. "The specimens are assembled, Commander," Gorik announced with a deferential bow. From an elevated platform, a larger Kthar emerged, his scales darker and adorned with metallic ornaments that presumably signified rank. Commander Forlag surveyed the prisoners with evident disdain. "So these are the representatives of the species pushing into our territory," Forlag's voice boomed through the chamber. "Unimpressive. Soft. Weak." He descended slowly, circling the gathered humans, occasionally prodding one with a ceremonial staff. When he reached Kale, he paused, noting the military bearing and the unflinching gaze. "This one has some spirit," Forlag observed. "Perhaps he will provide momentary entertainment in the arena before joining his brethren in death." "We are peaceful explorers," Dr. Thorne suddenly spoke up. "The United Earth Defense Force seeks only to establish diplomatic." A casual backhand from Forlag sent the elderly scientist sprawling. "Diplomacy is the language of the weak. The Kthar Empire speaks only the language of power and dominance. Your species will learn this lesson before we cleanse your worlds." Kale helped Dr. Thorne to his feet, his eyes never leaving Forlag. The commander smiled, an unnerving expression on his reptilian features. "Prepare them for the holding pens. The purification ritual begins in 3 cycles." Forlag turned to leave, then stopped. "Gorik, ensure the military one is matched against VH Tari. She enjoys breaking the spirited ones." A collective murmur ran through the Kthar guards, a mixture of anticipation and what sounded almost like sympathy. Kale filed the name away, VH Tari. As they were herded back to their cells, the avian being from before was pushed into the same detention area as Kale and Dr. Thorne. Up close, Kale could see that what he'd taken for feathers were actually fine, iridescent scales covering a lithe, powerful body. The being's eyes were sharp, intelligent, and deeply suspicious. "You're Lyran," Dr. Thorne whispered, his scientific curiosity momentarily overcoming his fear. "I've read theoretical xenobiology reports, but never thought to meet one." The Lyran regarded them coldly. "And you are humans, creatures who speak of peace while your boundaries expand ever outward." Her voice, for the translator rendered it in feminine tones, was melodic but sharp. "I am Zara, last warrior of the 7th Aerial Clutch. Or I was before the Kthar." "Captain Kalen Vance," Kale offered. "And this is Dr. Eris Thorne. How long have you been here?" "2 full lunar cycles of this station," Zara replied, keeping her distance. "Long enough to see dozens go to the arena. None return. What can you tell us about this VH Tari?" Kale asked. Zara's eyes narrowed. "You're matched against VH Tari? Then you're already dead. Human. She is the champion of this facility, undefeated in the arena. A female Kthar of the warrior elite caste, favored by Commander Forlag himself." She made a sound like bitter laughter. "She enjoys toying with her prey before ending them." The last opponent lasted nearly 2 minutes. She considered it a personal failure of efficiency. "The Kthar value strength and dominance above all," Dr. Thorne mused. "Their entire society is structured around it, which means they probably have weaknesses they don't acknowledge," Kale said quietly, beginning to pace the cell. "Overconfidence, predictable aggression patterns, blind spots in their combat techniques." Zara stared at him. "You speak as though you intend to survive." "I do." Kale's voice was steady. "And not just survive. I intend to send a message." "Impossible. You are matched against VH Tari. She will." "Every predator has vulnerabilities," Kale interrupted. "We just need to find them." Over the next 2 cycles, which Kale determined to be roughly equivalent to 30 Earth hours, he meticulously prepared himself. In the confined space of their cell, he practiced combat movements adapted to what he could observe of Cathar physiology, their weight distribution, joint flexibility, and reaction patterns. Dr. Thorne, meanwhile, had begun collecting information from Zara and through careful observation of the guards. Their auditory systems are highly sensitive, he whispered to Kale during a rest period, particularly to high-frequency sounds. It's an evolutionary trait from their homeworld's predator-heavy environment. They could detect movements through minute vibrations in air and ground, which means the right frequency could disorient them, Kale concluded. Temporarily, yes. Their brain structure suggests they'd recover quickly, but it might give you a moment's advantage. Zara had been watching their exchanges with increasing interest. Eventually, she approached Kale as he went through a series of controlled exercises. You fight differently than most humans I've observed, she noted. Less brute force, more precision. Fighter-pilot training, Kale explained. We learn to handle high-G maneuvers, which requires understanding how force affects the body, knowing when to resist and when to redirect. The Cathar rely on overwhelming strength and aggression. They don't expect subtlety. That's what I'm counting on. Kale paused, studying her. You've survived here longer than most. You must have information that could help. Zara hesitated, then slowly nodded. Perhaps, but why should I aid you? Humans are potential competitors in the galaxy, just as the Cathar are predators. Because right now, we face a common enemy, Kale replied, and survival requires adaptation. Sometimes that means forming unlikely alliances. Before she could respond, Gorik appeared at their cell with two other guards. The energy barrier dissipated. Time for your daily humiliation, human slave, he growled, entering with a shock prod. This had become a routine. Gorik would provoke Kale, attempting to break his spirit before the arena. This time, however, Kale was ready. As Gorik lunged with the prod, Kale sidestepped with unexpected speed, causing the guard to stumble forward. He didn't attack. That would bring severe punishment, but the simple act of making the Cathar look foolish achieved his purpose. Gorik roared in anger, swinging wildly. Kale dodged again, his movements economical and precise. When the other guards moved to intervene, Kale immediately stopped and stood with his hands visible. Just stretching my legs, he said calmly. No harm intended. Gorik's eyes blazed with fury. You will regret this insolence in the arena, human. VH Tari will make you suffer before you die. He stormed out, the energy barrier reactivating behind him. Dr. Thorne looked pale. That was dangerous, Captain. It was necessary, Kale replied. I needed to confirm something about their movement patterns. And, Zara asked, a new respect in her voice. They overcommit. When angered, they sacrifice precision for power. Kale turned to Dr. Thorne. How are you coming with that frequency device we discussed? The scientist held up a small object cobbled together from components he'd managed to salvage from their meager surroundings. It's crude, but it should produce the frequency we need. Very short range, though. You need to be close. Close is where I'll be, Kale said grimly. Later that day, as Kale continued his preparation, a different group of guards arrived to escort several prisoners to witness the ongoing matches. When they returned, the mood was somber. We saw her, one of the human engineers whispered to Kale. VH Tari. It wasn't a fight, it was an execution. Tell me everything, Kale insisted. Every detail about her fighting style, weapons, movements. As the prisoner described the brutal efficiency of the female Cathar warrior, Kale's expression remained impassive, but his mind was cataloging every piece of information, forming a mental model of his opponent. That night, as the others slept, Zara approached Kale where he sat in meditation. You truly believe you can defeat her, she said. It wasn't a question. I believe I can survive her, Kale corrected. Victory might look different than the Cathar expect. Zara studied him for a long moment. There's something you should know. The rear leg joints of the Cathar females are different from the males, more flexible for climbing, but also more vulnerable to lateral pressure. She demonstrated a subtle movement. Their combat training compensates for this, but if surprised. Kale nodded, adding this crucial detail to his mental plan. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, human. Tomorrow, we'll We'll see if your strategy is wisdom or delusion. The final cycle passed quickly. Dr. Thorne made last-minute adjustments to his crude sonic device. Zara shared additional insights about Cthar combat techniques she'd observed. Kale absorbed everything, refining his approach, visualizing the coming confrontation in detail. When Gorik and a contingent of 6 guards arrived, Kale was ready. They bound his hands with energy restraints that allowed limited movement but prevented any significant resistance. Your time has come, human slave, Gorik sneered. VH Tari is in rare form today. She's already dispatched 2 opponents and requested you specifically for a 3rd match. He leaned closer. She remembered you from her visit to the detention level. The human who thinks he has pride. Kale was led through a series of corridors and finally into a preparation chamber adjacent to the arena. There, his restraints were modified to allow greater movement, and he was provided with a simple weapon, a metal spear with a sharpened end. Basic, primitive by Cthar standards, but effective enough to make the contest appear fair. A final courtesy, Gorik said mockingly, though it will do you little good against VH Taris. Blades. The sounds from the arena filtered through, the roar of the crowd, the announcement system in the harsh Cthar language that Dr. Thorne had begun to decipher. Kale took slow, measured breaths, centering himself as he would before a combat flight mission. Dr. Thorne's device was concealed in his hand, small enough to be hidden from casual inspection. Zara's information about Cthar physiology replayed in his mind. Everything now depended on timing, precision, and the element of surprise. A gong-like sound reverberated, and the doors to the arena slid open. Kale stepped forward into blinding light and deafening noise. The VH Lock Arena was a massive circular pit approximately 30 meters in diameter. The floor was covered with reddish sand, stained darker in places with what could only be blood from previous contests. Rising around it were tiered seating areas filled with Cthar and representatives from subjugated species, all cheering, jeering, and placing bets on the outcome. On an elevated platform draped with ceremonial hangings sat Commander Forlag, surrounded by what appeared to be military and political elites. His expression was one of anticipation and cruel amusement as he watched Kale enter. From the opposite side of the arena emerged VH Tari. She was larger than the male Cthar guards, standing nearly 8 feet tall, her scales a deep blue-green that shimmered under the arena lights. Powerful muscles rippled beneath her ceremonial armor, which covered strategic points but left much of her form unencumbered for maximum mobility. In each hand, she wielded a curved blade of some dark metal that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. Her eyes, bright yellow with vertical pupils, fixed on Kale with predatory focus. Her mouth curled in what passed for a smile among her kind. The human slave finally arrives, her translator projected loudly enough for the crowd to hear. I expected more from a species that dares to push in a Cthar space. You seem hardly worth the energy to kill. Kale remained silent, analyzing her stance, the distribution of her weight, the way she gripped her weapons. Information far more valuable than trading insults. VH Tari circled slowly, her movements fluid and confident. No words, human. Has fear taken your voice? The crowd roared with laughter at her taunt. Commander Forlag watched with clear amusement. The signal horn blared, a piercing sound that marked the official start of combat. VH Tari didn't hesitate, launching herself forward with frightening speed, her blades arcing toward Kale in a deadly crosscut designed to end the match in seconds. Instead of attempting to block, which would have been futile against her superior strength, Kale rolled sideways, letting her momentum carry her past him. The crowd gasped at the unexpected evasion. VH Tari recovered instantly, spinning back with another flurry of strikes. Again, Kale avoided direct confrontation, using minimal movements to stay just beyond her reach, conserving energy while forcing her to expend hers. "Stand and fight, coward," she snarled, her initial amusement turning to frustration. The pattern continued for nearly a minute, an eternity in gladiatorial combat. VH Tari attacking with increasingly aggressive combinations, Kale evading with the precision and spatial awareness honed by years of fighter combat. The crowd's mood began to shift. What they had expected to be a quick, brutal execution was becoming something else. Murmurs spread through the arena. Forlag's expression darkened. VH Tari sensed the changing atmosphere and redoubled her efforts, roaring as she launched a particularly vicious sequence of attacks. One blade grazed Kale's arm, drawing first blood. The crowd cheered at the sight, but it was a superficial wound. "You cannot evade forever, human," VH Tari hissed. "I will wear you down and then take you apart, piece by piece." Kale continued his strategy of controlled retreat, drawing her into overcommitting, studying the rhythm of her attacks. He was waiting for the perfect moment when frustration would override her training. It came after another failed combination. VH Tari, enraged by her inability to land a decisive blow, charged with both blades raised for a powerful overhead strike. In that instant, Kale activated Dr. Thorne's device. The high-frequency sound was inaudible to human ears, but had an immediate effect on VH Tari. She faltered mid-strike, her eyes widening in confusion and discomfort, her equilibrium momentarily disrupted. Kale seized the opportunity. Instead of attacking her vital areas, he executed a precise sweep with his spear, targeting the joint in her rear leg that Zara had identified. Simultaneously, he used the spear's handle to strike hard against the connection point, applying lateral pressure exactly where the female Kthar anatomy was most vulnerable. The combination was devastating. VH Tari's leg buckled unnaturally, and she crashed to the ground with a roar of pain and surprise. Her blades scattered across the sand. Before she could recover, Kale was upon her, his spear pressed firmly against her throat, his knee strategically positioned to apply pressure to the injured joint if she attempted to rise. The entire sequence, from the activation of the sonic device to VH Tari's complete subjugation, had taken less than 30 seconds. The arena fell into stunned silence. VH Tari lay immobilized, her eyes wide with disbelief and rage, staring up at the human who had done the impossible. Kale stood firm, spear unwavering, his gaze lifting to meet Commander Forlag's shocked expression. For several heartbeats, no one moved or spoke. The silence was absolute, a vacuum of sound where moments before there had been cacophony. Every Kthar in the arena seemed frozen, unable to process what they had just witnessed. It was Forlag who finally broke the spell, rising slowly from his seat, his expression a complex mixture of fury, disbelief, and something that might have been fear. "Finish her," he commanded, his voice echoing across the silent arena. Kale didn't move. The point of his spear remained at VH Tari's throat, but he made no motion to push it deeper. "I said finish her. Forlag Roaret." "The match is over," Kale responded, his voice calm but carrying. "My opponent can no longer fight. Victory has been achieved." Another wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. This concept, victory without death, seemed alien to Kthar combat traditions. "This is not our way," Forlag snarled. "The purification ritual demands blood." "Then your ritual needs to evolve," Kale replied, still not moving. "As do your perceptions of humans and other species." The audacity of the statement sent shockwaves through the arena. Some Kthar rose to their feet, hissing threats. Others watched in fascination. Beneath him, VH Tari's breathing was rapid, her eyes never leaving Kale's face. "Why?" she whispered, too quietly for the crowd to hear. "Why not kill me?" "Because I don't need to," Kale answered simply. Forlag's scales darkened with rage. For a moment, it seemed he might order his guards to execute both combatants on the spot. But the undercurrent in the arena had shifted. The crowd was waiting, watching, not just the match now, but Forlag himself, how he would respond to this unprecedented situation. Political instinct eventually overcame bloodlust. Forlag raised a clawed hand. "The human has won through unconventional means," he announced, clearly struggling with each word. "Take VH Tari to the medical chamber." The human returns to detention. Guards rush forward, roughly pulling Kale away from the fallen champion. As Tari was dragged from the arena, her eyes remained fixed on him, confused, angry, but also questioning. Kale was escorted back to the detention area, but not to his previous cell. Instead, he was taken to a smaller section of the facility where he found Dr. Thorne and Zara already waiting in a chamber that, while still a prison, offered marginally better conditions. "You did it," Dr. Thorne breathed as Kale entered. "You actually survived." "More than survived," Zara added, her previous cool demeanor replaced with something approaching respect. "You've created quite the disturbance in the station hierarchy." Guards posted outside their new quarters watched Kale warily. Through the transparent barriers, he could see other Kthar passing by, some slowing to stare at him with expressions ranging from hostility to curiosity. "What happens now?" Dr. Thorne asked. "Now we capitalize on the disruption," Kale said quietly. "Forlag will want me eliminated quickly and quietly. I've embarrassed him publicly. But others might see opportunity in what happened today." "The Kthar political structure is faction-based," Zara confirmed. "Forlag represents the traditional warrior elite, but there are others who favor different approaches to expansion. Some might view today's events as leverage against him." Over the next cycle, the effects of Kale's victory rippled through Lock Station. The 3 prisoners were kept isolated from others, but treated with noticeably less brutality. Gorak was nowhere to be seen, apparently reassigned or punished for his failure to properly assess the human threat. Through careful observation and snippets of information gathered from their guards, they learned that Tari had been demoted from her championship status, a humiliation that had never before occurred in the station's history. Rumors spoke of heated debates among the Kthar leadership about the implications of a human defeating their premier warrior. On the 3rd day of their confinement, an unexpected visitor arrived. The energy barrier deactivated briefly to admit a hooded figure who, when the guards had departed, revealed herself as Tari. Her posture was stiff, partly from her healing injury and partly from barely contained rage. She stood before Kale, towering over him, her claws flexing unconsciously. "You have destroyed my standing," she stated without preamble. "Centuries of honor and achievement, undone in 30 seconds by a primitive species." Kale met her gaze steadily. "Your standing was based on an illusion, that physical dominance alone determined superiority. I simply exposed that fallacy. Why did you not kill me?" The question burst from her with surprising intensity. "Death would have preserved my honor. This, living shame, is far worse. In human culture, killing an opponent isn't necessary to prove superiority," Kale explained. "Sometimes, mercy demonstrates greater strength than execution." Mercy, Tari, spat the translated word as if it tasted foul. "A concept for the weak. Is it weak to have options and choose the one that serves your long-term interests?" Kale challenged. "If I had killed you, I would have become just another savage alien in Kthar eyes. By sparing you, I forced everyone to reconsider their assumptions about humans." Tari fell silent, her reptilian features impossible to read. Finally, she said, "There are those among my kind who have taken interest in your victory. Forlag's enemies see opportunity in his humiliation. He plans to eliminate you quietly, blaming a failed escape attempt." "And you're telling us this why?" Zara asked suspiciously. "Because my honor demands repayment of my life debt," Tari replied stiffly. "And because perhaps there is something to learn from this human's approach." This admission seemed physically painful for her. Kale recognized the monumental shift it represented in her worldview. "When will Forlag make his move?" he asked. "Tomorrow's cycle. A power fluctuation will be engineered in this sector. During the confusion, his personal guard will enter and execute all 3 of you. Then we need to prepare," Kale said. "And I think I have a plan that might benefit us all." While Kale outlined his strategy, Dr. Thorne was working on another project, modifying communications equipment Zara had managed to smuggle into their quarters. Using his scientific knowledge and the Lyran's familiarity with various technologies, They were attempting to send a weak distress signal to any UEDF vessels that might be searching the sector. If we boost the signal using the station's own communication array during the power fluctuation, Dr. Thorne explained, we might reach our people. That's assuming we survive Forlag's assassination attempt, Zara pointed out. We'll do more than survive, Kale said, turning to VH Tari. We'll turn it against him entirely. When the power fluctuation came the next day, they were ready. As emergency lighting bathed the detention area in red glow, the energy barriers flickered and died. Moments later, four of Forlag's elite guards entered, weapons drawn. What they didn't expect was for VH Tari to be waiting inside, having been secretly admitted earlier. The resulting confusion gave Kale, Zara, and VH Tari the crucial moments they needed. Working together, human reflexes, Lyran agility, and Cthar strength, they subdued the assassination squad with minimal noise. While Zara secured the unconscious guards, Dr. Thorne activated his modified transmitter, sending their distress signal bouncing through the station's main array during the power disruption when security protocols were temporarily offline. Disguised in the guard's armor and accompanied by VH Tari, who could move freely throughout the station, they made their way toward the command center where evidence of Forlag's unsanctioned execution order had been planted by VH Tari's new allies, a faction of Cthar led by a subcommander Drezek, who had long sought to challenge Forlag's leadership. The confrontation in the command center was brief but intense. Forlag, faced with the human he had failed to eliminate and evidence of his dishonorable conduct, attempted to maintain control. "This is treachery," he roared as Drezek's supporters surrounded him. "The word of a disgraced champion and a human slave against mine?" "Not just words," Kale said, activating a recording device Vishtari had provided, containing Forlag's explicit orders to execute prisoners without trial, a violation of even the Cthar's harsh code of justice. Evidence. What followed was not a bloody coup, but a surprisingly orderly transfer of power. Drezek, while still a Cthar military leader with all the aggression that implied, represented a faction that believed adaptation and strategic alliance might serve the Empire better than endless conquest. The human defeated our champion not through superior strength, but superior strategy, Drezek announced to the assembled Cthar officers. There are lessons here that we would be fools to ignore. Forlag was removed from command, his fate to be determined by Cthar hierarchical protocols. Drezek assumed control of VH Lock Station and immediately ordered improved conditions for all prisoners pending review of their cases. In the relative privacy of what had been Forlag's office, Drezek addressed Kale directly. "You should understand, human, that this represents no fundamental shift in Cthar policy toward your species. We are still competitors for territory and resources, but perhaps not enemies by necessity," Kale suggested. "Perhaps," Drezek conceded reluctantly. "Your tactics have provoked thought among some of our younger warriors. VH Tari among them, surprisingly. Speaking of whom," Kale said, "what happens to her now? That remains undecided. By tradition, a defeated champion faces exile or worse. But these are unusual circumstances." 3 days later, Dr. Thorne's modified transmission brought unexpected results. A response from a UEDF scout vessel that had been searching for survivors from the destroyed escort ship. They were a week away at maximum speed, but they were coming. The news created a new challenge. What would happen when UEDF forces arrived at a Cthar facility? Would it trigger the larger conflict that both sides had been skirting for years? In an unprecedented move, Drezek agreed to negotiations, with Kale serving as the impromptu human representative and VH Tari, whose perspective had been profoundly altered by recent events. Providing crucial support from the Cthar side, they hammered out preliminary terms for the peaceful transfer of human prisoners. As the day of the UEDF's arrival approached, Kale found VH Tari in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. "What will you do now?" he asked. "My path is uncertain," she admitted. "I cannot return to my former status, nor do I wish to. What you showed me in the arena." She struggled to find the words. "There are other forms of strength beyond what I was taught. I find I wish to understand them better. You could be a bridge between our species," Kale suggested. someone who understands both perspectives. Perhaps. She turned to face him fully. And you, human, when your people arrive, will you push for war against the Cathar? I'll push for understanding, Kale replied. War should always be the last option, not the first. What happened here? A human and a Cathar warrior finding common ground. That's worth building upon. On the day the UEDF vessel docked with VH Lock Station, tension ran high. Cathar warriors lined the corridors, their posture defensive but not overtly hostile. Human security teams moved with similar caution, weapons ready but not raised. In the central docking chamber, Kale stood with Dr. Thorne, Zara, and the 17 other human survivors. Across from them were Drezik, VH Tari, and several Cathar officers. Between these two groups lay the uncertain future of interstellar relations. The human captain who stepped through the airlock looked from one group to the other with unconcealed surprise. Captain Vance, she said, recovering quickly. Your distress message was received, but I must admit, this isn't the scenario we were expecting to find. It's not what any of us expected, Captain, Kale replied. But sometimes the unexpected opens doors we didn't know existed. As the humans prepared to depart, VH Tari approached Kale one final time. The debt between us is settled, she said formally. But I find myself curious about what comes next. So am I, Kale replied. This isn't an ending, it's a beginning. The transfer of prisoners proceeded smoothly, each human cataloged and medically assessed before boarding the UEDF vessel. Dr. Thorne lingered behind, gathering final observations and data that might prove valuable for future diplomatic efforts. They're not what I expected, he confided to Kale as they waited their turn. The Cathar, I mean. Their society is brutal by our standards, yes, but their sophistication beneath the aggression, adaptability we didn't anticipate. Every species evolves, Kale said, watching Drezik confer with his officers. Sometimes they just need a catalyst. Zara approached, her sleek form drawing curious glances from the human rescue team. I've decided to accompany you, she announced, as an independent representative of the Lyran refugees. There are matters my people must discuss with Earth authorities if we're to find common cause against Cathar expansion. You be welcome, Kale assured her. Your knowledge will be invaluable. On the observation deck of the UEDF vessel, Kale watched as VH Lock Station receded into the distance. So much had changed in so little time. What had begun as a disastrous capture had transformed into perhaps the most significant first contact breakthrough in human history. Captain Serena Walsh, commander of the rescue vessel, joined him at the viewport. Intelligence will want a complete debriefing, she said. This changes our understanding of Cathar society considerably. They're not monolithic, Kale replied. There are factions, differing philosophies. Drezik represents a pragmatic minority willing to consider alternatives to perpetual conquest. And this female warrior who helped you, VH Tari? What's her stake in this? Kale considered the question. She's something new. A Cathar questioning their oldest traditions after seeing them fail. That makes her dangerous to conservatives like Forlag, but potentially valuable to progressives like Drezik. And to us. Potentially our most important ally, Kale said, someone who's walked both paths. As the ship prepared for FDL jump, a communication request came through from VH Lock Station. To everyone's surprise, it was VH Tari herself. Captain Vance, she began formally. Before your departure from our space, I wish to convey a message from Subcommander Drezik. He proposes a neutral meeting ground in the Cygnus Void for preliminary discussions between your authorities and a Cathar delegation. Captain Walsh exchanged glances with Kale before responding. That would require approval from UEDF High Command. We can relay the request. There is more, VH Tari continued. I have been appointed as liaison for these discussions. Her reptilian features remained impassive, but Kale detected something like pride in her bearing. My experience with humans makes me uniquely qualified. From arena opponent to diplomatic representative, Kale observed. That's quite a transition. As you said, human victory can take many forms. I find this one satisfactory. After the communication ended, Captain Walsh turned to Kale. You realize what this means? The Kthar are actually considering diplomatic relations instead of conquest. That's unprecedented. 30 seconds in an arena changed everything, Kale said quietly. All it took was showing them a different way to measure strength. The journey back to Earth took 2 weeks through folded space. During that time, Kale worked closely with Dr. Thorne and Zara to compile everything they had learned about Kthar biology, technology, and social structures. What emerged was a picture far more complex than UEDF intelligence had previously constructed. Their hierarchical system isn't purely based on physical dominance, as we thought, Dr. Thorne explained during a briefing with the ship's senior officers. There's a sophisticated meritocracy underneath it all. Achievement matters, not just raw power. Which explains why Tari's defeat was so significant, Kale added. It wasn't just that she lost, but how she lost to strategy rather than superior strength. It challenged their fundamental assumptions. When they finally reached Earth, the reception was considerably larger than Kale had anticipated. News of potential diplomatic contact with a previously hostile Kthar had reached the highest levels of government. The survivors of Lock Station found themselves at the center of a political storm. They want to parade us around like victory trophies, Zara observed distastefully as they prepared for debriefing at UEDF headquarters in Geneva. Using your arena triumph as propaganda, which would undermine everything we're trying to accomplish, Kale agreed. The point wasn't human superiority. It was that different approaches can coexist. In the weeks that followed, Kale found himself shuttled between military debriefings and diplomatic preparatory sessions. The proposed meeting with the Kthar delegation had been approved, scheduled for 3 months hence in the neutral territory of Cygnus Void. Earth was sending its most experienced first contact specialists, accompanied by military advisors, including Kale. You've become something of a legend among the Kthar, Admiral Chen told him during one planning session. The human who defeated their champion and changed their policy. Like it or not, your presence at these talks is essential. I'm a fighter pilot, not a diplomat, Kale protested. You're both now, the Admiral replied. Sometimes history chooses us for roles we didn't anticipate. 2 months later, as preparations for the diplomatic mission neared completion, Kale received an unexpected visitor at his temporary quarters. Zara, elegant in her ceremonial Lyran attire, brought news. A Kthar advance vessel has arrived in the outer system, she informed him, carrying a single representative requesting preliminary consultation. Tari, Zara nodded. She specifically asked to speak with you before the formal negotiations begin. The authorities are cautiously agreeable, given your history. The meeting took place at the Lunar Diplomatic Facility, a neutral ground established for sensitive extraterrestrial contacts. Kale arrived early, finding the chamber already adjusted for Kthar environmental preferences, warmer and more humid than humans typically found comfortable. When Tari entered, Kale was struck by the changes in her. She moved with the same predatory grace, but her ceremonial armor had been replaced by what appeared to be the formal attire of a Kthar diplomat, still martial in design, but with symbolic elements he hadn't seen before. Captain Vance, she greeted him, using the human custom of a slight head bow rather than Kthar dominance gestures. Tari, he returned. You look different, as do you. Her gaze swept over his formal UEDF uniform. No longer arena combatants, it seems. Some might say diplomacy is just another kind of combat. A sound emerged that Kale eventually recognized as Kthar laughter. Perhaps that is why I find myself unexpectedly suited to this role, she said. They sat across from each other at a table designed to accommodate both species comfortably. For a moment, neither spoke, the memory of their arena confrontation hanging between them. You should know, Tari finally said, that since our encounter, much has changed within the Empire. Drezik's faction has gained influence. There's serious debate about our expansion policies for the first time in generations. Because of one arena match? Because you demonstrated an alternative to our traditional paradigm. She leaned forward. For millennia, the Kthar have equated strength with dominance, victory with destruction. You showed another path. Not killing you wasn't meant as a political statement, Kale said. Yet it became one, she replied. The most powerful statements rarely announce themselves as such. She placed a data crystal on the table between them. This contains Drezik's preliminary proposals for territorial demarcation and non-aggression protocols. A starting position only, but offered in good faith. Kale nodded, leaving the crystal untouched as protocol demanded. We'll review it carefully. Our delegation is preparing similar proposals. But that is not why I requested this meeting, Tari continued. I came to warn you of factions within the Empire who view these developments with alarm. Forlag has supporters who see accommodation with humans as weakness, a betrayal of Cathar traditions. You're saying the diplomatic effort is in danger. I'm saying progress rarely comes without resistance. Her yellow eyes held his. What began in that arena has larger implications than either of us could have foreseen. Some will fight to preserve the old ways. On both sides, Kale acknowledged. Not everyone on Earth wants peaceful coexistence either. They fell silent again, two former enemies now bound by something neither had anticipated. In our traditions, Tari said finally, when a warrior spares another in combat, it creates a bond called Keshar Vek, life-debt intertwined. It means our fates become connected. What affects one affects the other. I didn't know that when I spared you. Yet the bond exists nonetheless. She rose to her full height. What we began in that arena, Captain Vance, whether we intended it or not, will shape the relationship between our species for generations to come. As she turned to leave, Kale called after her. 30 seconds changed everything. Tari paused at the doorway. 30 seconds showed us possibility. What follows will determine whether we embrace it or reject it. Her voice softened, almost imperceptibly. Until the diplomatic summit, Captain, I look forward to seeing what we build upon the foundation laid in Lock's arena. After she departed, Kale remained in the chamber, contemplating the data crystal and all it represented. What had begun as a desperate fight for survival had evolved into something far more significant. The tentative first steps toward understanding between fundamentally different species. Outside the viewport, Earth hung in the blackness of space, beautiful, vulnerable, unaware of how close it had come to devastating conflict. Beyond, invisible but present, waited the vast Cathar Empire with its complex factions and evolving perspectives. Between these worlds stood individuals like himself and Tari, changed by encounter, bound by respect, navigating uncharted territory. The real challenge wasn't in those 30 seconds of combat, but in what would follow, the patient, difficult work of building bridges where only weapons had existed before. Kale picked up the data crystal, turning it slowly in his hand. From human slave to respected adversary to potential peacemaker. Not the journey he had expected when his fighter was captured, but perhaps the one the galaxy needed. The familiar weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders as he prepared to return to Earth with Tari's message. The arena might have been just 30 seconds, but its legacy would endure for generations to come. Proof that even the most entrenched enemies could find common ground when brave enough to consider alternatives to destruction. In that moment, Captain Kalen Vance understood that sometimes victory didn't wear the face you expected, and strength came in forms no combat training could teach. As Tari had said, 30 seconds showed possibility. The future would reveal what they built upon that foundation.